My girlfriend laughed about cheating on me thinking I'd never notice. So I quietly cut her off and watched her life crumble. This happened a few months ago, but I needed time to process everything before posting. I made a throwaway account since some friends know my main, and this story is pretty specific. I should probably start with some background about myself. I'm 27, male, and work as a medical device sales rep for one of the big players in the industry. You know those guys who show up in operating rooms with fancy equipment and teach surgeons how to use the latest implants and tools? That's me. I got into it right out of college, landed a junior position, and basically killed myself working up the ladder. Turns out, being young in this field is actually an advantage because you can handle the insane schedule better than the older reps. For those wondering about the money, since it becomes relevant later, my base salary is around $165,000 plus commission. Good years can push total compensation well over $250,000. But you seriously earn every penny. My schedule is absolute chaos. Up at 4 in the morning for early surgeries, driving between 3 different hospitals most days, late-night dinner meetings with doctors to discuss upcoming procedures. Sometimes, I'm in the operating room for 12 hours straight. Other times, I'm putting 300 miles on my car going between facilities. It's not exactly the kind of job that makes having a normal relationship easy. I also do some consulting work on the side, helping smaller medical companies figure out their sales strategies and get their foot in the door with hospitals. That brings in decent extra cash, but means my weekends aren't really my own either. Looking back, this crazy schedule probably made it easier for Sarah, obviously not her real name, to pull off what she did. But we'll get to that part. I met Sarah, 23, female, about 3 years ago, at this little hospital cafe where I was killing time between surgeries. She was working there part-time while trying to finish her communications degree. Man, the first time I saw her, it was like one of those stupid movie moments. She was gorgeous, had this infectious laugh, and seemed genuinely interested in my work. We got talking about medical stuff, and she had all these questions about what I did. Looking back now, those questions were way more focused on money than actual interest in the job, but love makes you love blind, I guess. I remember our first real date. I took her to this nice steakhouse near the hospital. She ordered the most expensive thing on the menu without even glancing at the price, but I was so caught up in how amazing she looked that I didn't even care. She told me all about her dreams of working in healthcare PR, how she wanted to help medical companies tell their stories better. Funny how that worked out. Turned out she was pretty good at telling stories all right, just not the kind she claimed. Red flags started popping up pretty early, but I was too stupid to see them for what they were. Like 2 weeks into dating, she was already asking really specific questions about my commission structure, wanting to know exactly how the bonus system worked. When the big payouts came, she'd make these jokes about how lucky she was to find a guy with such a stable career. But you know how it is when you're falling for someone. Your brain just finds ways to explain away all that stuff. The really messed up part? I actually liked how interested she seemed in my career. Most girls I dated before would get annoyed with the crazy hours and constant phone calls from surgeons. But Sarah? She acted like she totally got it. Would bring me coffee during long cases, text me good luck before big surgeries, even learned some medical terminology so she could understand what I was talking about. Now I know it was all an act, but damn if she wasn't good at playing the supportive girlfriend role. What gets me is how she managed to make everything seem so natural. She didn't just go straight for the expensive stuff, she built it up slowly. Started with small things, like asking me to grab dinner because she was broke till payday, then it was helping with her phone bill because she had an emergency. Before I knew it, I was paying for everything, but it happened so gradually that it felt normal. I remember this one time, maybe 6 months in, when she got stranded at the mall because her card got declined. She called me crying about how embarrassed she was. I left in the middle of a lunch meeting with a surgeon to bring her my card. She acted so grateful, kept saying how lucky she was to have me, even made this big show of trying to pay me back later with money she'd borrowed from her mom. I found out later, looking back, that was probably a test, seeing how far I'd go to help her out of a crisis. The thing that really kills me is how many people tried to warn me. My best friend straight up told me she seemed more interested in my wallet than me. My sister said something felt off about how quickly Sarah went from independent to totally relying on me financially. Even my mom made some comments about how Sarah never offered to help with anything that cost money. But I defended her every time, like a complete idiot. Told them they didn't understand her situation, how hard she was working on school, how much potential she had. God, writing all this out makes me feel like such a love. But I guess that's why I'm sharing it. Maybe someone else will recognize these patterns before they waste 3 years of their life like I did. So, fast forward about 6 months into our relationship. Sarah's lease was coming up, and she started dropping hints about how much money she could save if we lived together. Made it sound so logical. We were spending most nights at each other's places anyway, and her apartment was basically just storing her stuff at this point. Plus, she argued, combining our incomes would let us get a really nice place downtown. Yeah, about that combining incomes part. We found this gorgeous apartment downtown, walking distance to some of my main hospital accounts. $2,800 a month, which was steep, but Sarah convinced me it was worth it because I'd save so much time not having to commute. The plan was she'd pay utilities and groceries while I covered rent. Seemed fair at the time since I made more. Spoiler alert, that arrangement lasted exactly 2 months. First, it was little things. Her hours at the cafe kept getting cut, they hadn't. I found out later she'd requested fewer shifts. Then she was struggling to keep up with her car payments because textbooks cost so much this semester. Each time she had a money problem, she'd get really anxious, start crying about how stressed she was trying to balance work and school, and stupid me, I'd swoop in to fix everything. I still remember the day she quit her cafe job, came home in tears, saying her manager was sexually harassing her. Another lie, turns out she just stopped showing up and got fired. She was so upset, saying she couldn't focus on her studies with all this stress. I told her not to worry about it, that I'd cover everything until she graduated. The smile she gave me, man, I should have seen it for what it was. She just landed her biggest score yet. After that, my expenses basically doubled overnight. Rent, utilities, her car payment, insurance, phone bill, credit card bills, which somehow kept getting higher, plus all the little stuff she'd ask for. New clothes for interviews, a laptop for school, textbooks, supplies. She even convinced me to pay her student loan payments because she was building her credit for our future. Meanwhile, I'm busting my a-hole even harder at work, started taking on more consulting gigs, picking up extra surgeries whenever I could. There were weeks I'd be at the hospital by 4:30 in the morning, finish my last case at 6 in the evening, then drive 2 hours to consult at some startup med device company until 10 at night. Some nights, I'd get home so tired I could barely see straight. But Sarah? She was living her best life on my dime, always had the latest iPhone, designer bags, new clothes, started getting her nails done weekly, hair done monthly at this fancy salon downtown. When I'd mention the expenses piling up, she'd get really quiet and sad, start talking about how maybe she was holding me back, and how she understood if I wanted to find someone more successful. Classic manipulation, but it worked every time. I'd end up apologizing and telling her not to worry about the money. Here's the really love-up part. She got really good at timing her expensive requests with my big commission checks, like she had a sixth sense for when I was about to get paid. The day before a major bonus hit, suddenly her laptop would break. Or she'd have some urgent bill that needed paying. She knew exactly how much I made, and when I made it. The worst thing was watching my savings disappear. I used to be pretty good with money, had a solid emergency fund, was investing regularly, the whole responsible adult thing. But supporting 2 people in an expensive city while trying to maintain the lifestyle she'd gotten used to? That love adds up fast. Found out later she was actually taking pictures of my credit card statements when they came in, tracking exactly how much I had available. Looking back, I can't believe how blind I was. The signs were everywhere, like how she'd get super interested in my work around commission time, asking detailed questions about which surgeons I was working with and how many cases I had scheduled, or how she always seemed to have some crisis that needed money right when I was too busy with work to really look into it. Now I'm ready to tell you about the day everything fell apart. It was a Tuesday. I remember because Tuesdays were usually my busiest days. Typically had back-to-back surgeries scheduled at 3 different hospitals. But that day, something weird happened. My last 2 cases got canceled because the surgeon caught the flu. It was only 2 in the afternoon, and for the first time in months, I had a free afternoon. I decided to surprise Sarah. She'd been complaining that we never spent time together anymore. Rich, considering what I found out later. There's this really high-end sushi place she loves, the kind where you drop $150 easy on a few fancy rolls. I called ahead, ordered all her favorites, that ridiculous gold flake roll she always posted on Instagram, the fatty tuna that cost more than my first car payment, the works. Even got that overpriced steak she liked. The whole drive home, I was actually feeling good about life, like maybe things were finally settling down at work, and we could get back to how we used to be. Funny how life gives you these perfect setup moments before it kicks you in the teeth. Got to our building around 3 in the afternoon. The first weird thing I noticed was that her study group car wasn't in the parking lot. Sarah always said her friend Amy drove her to these study sessions, but instead, I saw her best friend Jessica's car. Not a red flag on its own, they hung out sometimes, but something felt off. Walking up to our apartment, 17 floors, elevator was down for maintenance, because of course it was. I started hearing voices through the door. The door was cracked open slightly. Sarah always did this when she had friends over because our hallway got so hot. I was about to walk in when I heard my name. Mike has no love clue, Sarah was saying, and then she laughed. Not her normal laugh, this was different, mean, mocking. He's so desperate to keep me happy he'll pay for anything. Did I tell you guys about the new iPhone? Didn't even question it when I said I needed it for school projects. I froze. The takeout bag suddenly felt like it weighed 1,000 pounds in my hand. Through the crack in the door I could see them sitting in our living room, Sarah, Jessica, and another girl I didn't recognize. They were drinking wine, the expensive stuff I'd bought for our anniversary. "Girl, you've got it made," Jessica was saying, "but aren't you worried he'll find out about Chris?" My stomach dropped. Chris, her ex, the abusive one she told me horror stories about, the one she claimed she had to get a restraining order against. Another lie, I later discovered. Sarah actually snorted. "Please, Mike's so busy working he doesn't even notice I'm gone half the time. He actually believes I'm at study group 3 nights a week. Meanwhile, Chris and I are using his credit card to fund our dates." The other girl, found out later it was Chris's sister, chimed in, "But what if Mike checks the credit card statements?" "He never does," Sarah said, sounding proud of herself. "He's too tired from all those surgeries. Plus I always time the bigger purchases around when he gets his commission checks. He thinks I'm so interested in his work. Oh honey, how many cases do you have this month? That big surgeon must be keeping you busy." Meanwhile, I'm just calculating how much I can spend. They all laughed at that. At me, in my own love apartment that I paid for. "Chris says I should keep Mike around until I finish school," Sarah continued. "He's like my personal ATM, and he's talking about proposing soon. Can you imagine? I could probably milk him for a huge wedding, then take half his stuff in the divorce." "But don't you feel bad?" the sister asked. "He seems nice." "Nice but boring," Sarah cut in. "Do you know what he did last week? Apologized for being too tired for sex after a 12-hour surgery. Pathetic. At least Chris knows how to have fun. And it's not like Mike doesn't get anything out of it. He gets to tell everyone he has a hot girlfriend. That's worth the price of admission, right? More laughter, more wine, more jokes at my expense." They went on for a while, Sarah telling them about all the ways she manipulated me, all the lies she told, all the time she'd been with Chris while I was working extra hours to pay for her lifestyle. I stood there for what felt like hours but was probably only minutes. My hands were shaking so bad I almost dropped the food. Part of me wanted to burst in there, to scream, to throw them all out, but a colder, calmer part of my brain kicked in. The part that closes million-dollar deals and keeps surgeons happy. "Don't let them know you know," that part whispered. "Not yet. Get evidence, plan it out, make them pay." So, I did something that probably saved me a lot of headaches later. I pulled out my phone and recorded about 10 minutes of their conversation. Got Sarah on video admitting to cheating, to lying, to using me for money. Then, as quietly as I could, I walked back down 17 floors. Sitting in my car, surrounded by overpriced sushi I'd bought for a woman who'd been laughing at me for years, I started making plans. They wanted to play games with my money? Fine. Let's see how funny they think it is when the ATM shuts down. After sitting in my car for what felt like hours, I drove to a bar near the hospital where I knew none of Sarah's friends would show up. Started making a list on my phone of everything I needed to do. The medical device sales world teaches you to be methodical. When you're dealing with million-dollar contracts and surgeons' egos, you learn to plan everything down to the smallest detail. I decided to treat this like I would a major account, gather intel, document everything, then execute perfectly. First stop was my bank. Thank God for Helen, this older lady who'd been handling my account since I started my job. When I told her I needed to review every transaction from the past year because I suspected fraud, she didn't even blink. Spent 3 hours going through statements, and holy love, the pattern was so obvious once I was actually looking. Every time I had a big commission check coming in, there'd be a spike in emergency expenses. New laptop, designer bags, spa days, all perfectly timed around my payday. Helen helped me document everything, then set up new accounts at a different bank. "Don't move your money yet," she advised. "Just be ready." Smart lady. Next, I called my lawyer buddy, Dave, met him at his office after hours and laid everything out. The recording from today, the bank statements, everything. He was actually impressed with how she'd played me. She was building a paper trail, he explained, making it look like you'd established a pattern of supporting her lifestyle. If you'd married her, she could have made a case for maintaining that lifestyle during divorce. Dave helped me make a plan. First, we documented everything in my apartment that I'd paid for, taking photos and collecting receipts. The designer bags, the jewelry, the electronics. Turned out I'd spent over $40,000 just on gifts in the past year. He also advised me to start documenting every time she was supposedly at study group, tracking her locations, saving any social media posts, everything. Remember that shared iPad she used for school? Turns out she never logged out of her messages or email. I'm not proud of what I found, but love it, she brought this on herself. There were hundreds of messages between her and Chris, going back almost 2 years, pictures of them together at hotels I paid for, restaurant receipts for my credit card. She'd even been sending him money through Venmo, my money naturally. But the real goldmine was her conversations with her friends, screenshots of my bank statements that she'd sent them, laughing about how much she could spend, messages planning how to ask for more money, going to tell him I need a new laptop for finals. The old one works fine, but whatever, LOL. Detailed discussions about how to slowly push for marriage. Once I get the ring, it's game over. I'll own half his love. The more I dug, the worse it got. Found messages to Chris about trying to get pregnant. Imagine how much child support I could get from him. He'd have to pay for everything. Thank love I always insisted on protection. There were even messages making fun of my work schedule. This idiot is doing back-to-back surgeries, while I'm at the beach with my real man. I didn't sleep that whole week. Every night, after she went to bed, I'd go through more messages, take more screenshots, gather more evidence. During the day, I acted completely normal. Went to work, did my cases, came home tired. She didn't suspect a thing, even asked me to buy her a new MacBook because hers was acting weird. I did it, wanted to keep her thinking everything was fine. The hardest part was playing nice with Chris's sister, who started showing up at our apartment more often. She'd sit there, drinking my wine, eating food I paid for, knowing the whole time what was going on. Once, I heard her warning Sarah to be more careful. Mike's not stupid, he might catch on. Sarah just laughed and said, "Please, he's too busy making money to notice anything." I also started digging into Chris's background. Remember how Sarah told me he was some successful business owner? Yeah, that was love. He worked as a bartender at some dive bar and had a record, mostly petty theft and a DUI, but he did have one interesting connection. His probation officer was a guy I knew from the hospital. We weren't close, but we'd chat when I saw him around. I filed that information away for later. By the end of the week, I had everything I needed. Video recording of Sarah admitting to cheating and financial manipulation, screenshots of hundreds of messages between her and Chris, photos of them together at hotels and restaurants, bank statements showing patterns of suspicious spending, documentation of all the lies about her study groups, evidence of her planning to trap me with marriage and pregnancy, screenshots of her sharing my financial information with friends, background info on Chris that would come in handy later. I saved everything in multiple places. Cloud storage, USB drives, even printed out hard copies that I kept in my office. Dave reviewed it all and confirmed I had more than enough to protect myself legally. But be smart, he warned. Don't confront her yet. Let her keep thinking she's winning. So, I waited, kept playing the role of the oblivious boyfriend. Even took her out to a fancy dinner that weekend, where she spent the whole time texting Chris under the table. Watched her buy another $500 purse with my card, while she had plans to meet him later that night. All the while, I was getting my pieces in place, preparing for the moment I'd shut down the ATM for good. The weekend after I gathered all the evidence, Sarah told me she had another study group session planned, said she'd be gone all day Saturday working on some big project. I knew she was actually planning to meet Chris. I'd seen their messages planning a day trip to a nearby beach town. Using my credit card to book a hotel room, of course. That Saturday morning, I woke up early and made her breakfast in bed. Played the perfect boyfriend one last time. She was so convinced of her control over me that she actually took a selfie with the breakfast I made, captioned it being spoiled and posted it to Instagram while texting Chris about their plans for later. As soon as she left, I put my plan into action. First step was the financial nuclear option. Remember Helen from the bank? She'd helped me prepare everything. Within an hour, I had transferred all my money to the new accounts at a different bank. Removed Sarah as an authorized user on all credit cards, canceled every card she had access to, changed all my banking passwords, put a fraud alert on my credit report, documented every penny she'd spent in the last month. Next came the apartment. I'd already talked to my landlord earlier in the week explaining the situation. Guy was actually really understanding. Turned out his ex-wife had done something similar to him. He agreed to let me break the lease with minimal penalty and had already drawn up papers removing Sarah from the building security access. I hired movers, paid them extra to come on short notice. In 4 hours they packed up everything I owned and everything I'd bought for Sarah. All those designer bags, the jewelry, the electronics. Everything went into storage. Left her personal stuff, the things she'd actually bought herself, neatly packed in boxes in the living room. The movers were just finishing up when I got a text from Sarah, having lunch with the study group, miss you. She attached a photo of a salad that I knew was actually from last week because I'd seen her post, the same photo in her group chat with Jessica. I didn't respond. Instead, I drove to the storage facility and documented everything I'd moved, taking photos and videos for legal purposes. Dave had advised me to keep all her stuff safe and accessible. This way she couldn't claim I'd stolen or damaged anything. The facility security cameras would prove nothing had been touched. Around 4 in the afternoon, my phone started blowing up. Sarah's first message was casual, "Hey babe, might be late tonight. Project's taking longer than expected." Translation: she and Chris were probably getting day drunk at the beach on my dime. I didn't reply. Instead, I went to meet Dave at his office. We'd prepared a stack of papers, documentation of all her spending, proof of the affair, evidence of her sharing my financial information, everything. Made copies and sent them to my work email, my personal email, and gave sets to both Dave and Helen for safekeeping. By 6 in the evening, Sarah was getting nervous. More texts started coming in. "Babe, why aren't you answering? Did you try to use the credit card? There must be some mistake. Mike, what's going on? Why can't I get into my bank account? The cards aren't working. Call me a sap." I watched the messages pile up while having dinner with Dave. He walked me through what to expect. She'd probably cycle through panic, anger, attempts to manipulate, and finally desperation. "The key," he said, "is to not engage at all. You have all the power as long as you stay silent." Around 8 in the evening, Sarah finally went home. I know the exact moment she walked into the apartment because my phone essentially exploded. 8:14, "What the love, Mike?" 8:14, "Where is all your stuff?" 8:15, "Why are my things in boxes?" 8:15, "Call me right love now." 8:16, 15 missed calls. Then came the voice messages. I listened to them later. Quite a performance. She went from screaming to crying to begging in the span of minutes. By 9 in the evening, she was calling from different numbers, probably borrowing phones from neighbors. I blocked each one. She tried email, blocked. Instagram, blocked. Even Love LinkedIn, blocked. She sent Jessica to my office. Security had already been notified not to let her in. The final message I got before blocking her completely was particularly desperate. "Please, Mike, I can explain everything. I need my stuff. I have finals next week. I can't lose the apartment. Please just talk to me. I love you. Whatever you think happened, it's not what you think." The morning after I moved everything out, Sarah went into full panic mode. I woke up to 47 missed calls and over 100 text messages from various numbers. She'd apparently spent the night calling everyone we knew, trying to figure out what happened. The story she was telling people was fascinating. According to her, I'd lost my mind and stolen everything while she was studying with friends. See, Sarah and Chris had this regular routine. They'd meet at this upscale hotel where they thought nobody would recognize them. The manager gave me access to their security footage, showing them using my credit card to check in multiple times over the past few months. Even better, I had receipts showing them charging room service and spa treatments to the room. While Sarah was having her meltdown at the apartment, I was setting up the final pieces. I had Dave draft a formal letter detailing everything we'd discovered, including exact amounts she'd spent on unauthorized purchases, dates, and times of her meetings with Chris. Copies of messages planning to trap me with marriage and pregnancy. Documentation of her sharing my financial information. Evidence of her using my cards to fund their affair. The letter made it clear she had 48 hours to arrange to pick up her belongings from storage, or they'd be considered abandoned. Also, any attempts to contact me would be considered harassment. Dave had it delivered to her at the apartment by a courier who recorded the delivery. Sarah's reaction was explosive, to say the least. She showed up at my office, mascara running, screaming about how I was ruining her life. Security had to escort her out. She tried waiting in the parking lot. I just stayed inside until she left. She even went to my mom's house. Bad move. My mom had never liked her, and took way too much pleasure in shutting the door in her face. But here's where it gets really good. Remember that probation officer I mentioned? Turns out Chris wasn't just on probation, he was on his last warning. The photos I had of him drinking and driving were a direct violation. His probation officer was especially interested in the credit card fraud angle. Within 48 hours, Chris was arrested for probation violation. Sarah found out about Chris's arrest while she was in the middle of trying to salvage her semester. She'd missed 2 finals because she was too busy having a meltdown about losing access to my money. Her professors weren't exactly sympathetic when she tried to explain that she couldn't take the tests because her boyfriend had caught her cheating and cut her off financially. The domino effect was beautiful to watch. No access to credit cards meant no way to pay for anything. No apartment, she wasn't on the lease, meant she had to move. Missed finals meant failing grades. Failed classes meant academic probation. No money for next semester's tuition. Chris in jail meant no backup plan. She tried everything to get back in contact with me. Some highlights: had her mom call my mom, got shut down hard, sent a handwritten letter to my office, returned unopened, created new social media accounts to message me, blocked, got mutual friends to try to mediate, showed them the evidence, they backed off, even tried to file a police report claiming I'd stolen her things. That backfired when I showed them the documentation. The best part? Those friends who used to drink my wine and laugh at me behind my back? They disappeared real quick when they realized Sarah couldn't fund those fancy brunches anymore. Jessica, who'd been her main enabler, blocked her number after Sarah tried to crash on her couch and borrow money for the 5th time. Meanwhile, Chris was having his own problems. During his probation violation hearing, evidence of the credit card fraud came up. His probation got revoked, and he was looking at serious jail time. His sister, remember her from the wine drinking session, tried to contact me to explain things. I sent her the video of her laughing along while Sarah talked about manipulating me. She didn't message again. But my favorite moment came about 2 weeks after everything went down. Sarah's dad called me. I actually answered because I was curious what she'd told her family. Turns out she'd been lying to them too. Told them she had a job, was paying her own way through school, all that. Her dad had just found out about all the debt she'd racked up in his name. He wasn't calling to defend her. He was calling to apologize to me and ask how much she'd stolen. The entire house of cards she'd built came crashing down in less than a month. She had to drop out of school, move back in with her parents in their small town, and get a job at the local Walmart. Last I heard, she was trying to convince her parents to pay off her credit card debt and let her enroll in community college. They refused. Chris got sentenced to 6 months for the probation violation. His bartending job fired him, and with a fraud charge pending, good luck getting another service industry job. Apparently, he's been telling people I set him up. Yeah, I totally set you up to drink and drive while on probation, bro. The best revenge? I didn't have to actually do much, just cut off the money and let their own actions catch up with them. Sometimes, the best revenge is just stepping back and watching karma do its thing.